there was this yogi on the plaza. He was performing on the plaza. He was sitting on hundreds of needles in lotus position. And then I was watching him. I was like, why on earth he will do something like that?
Welcome back to Full-Time Yoga Teacher Podcast. My name is Reika and I am your host. I hope you are having a great day wherever you are listening to this podcast from. So, little update, I am back to Moyobamba, which is jungle of Peru. I was in Cusco for the last 2 weeks, enjoying my time off, studying Spanish and being out in nature. And I am back in the jungle for now to start my second 200-hour teacher training program that I am here to teach. So I am excited for the next group to arrive and begin the teacher training process again. Full-Time Yoga Teacher Podcast is for yoga teachers or anyone who is interested in the life of a yoga teacher, or maybe yoga teacher who is interested in becoming a full-time yoga teacher. I interview different full-time yoga teachers from around the world and ask them questions of how they got to where they are now. How do they make living as a full-time yoga teacher work? Because these are the questions I had when I first started out as becoming a full-time yoga teacher. How is it possible? How do people make it work? What's their drive? What inspired them? What are some creative business endeavors that they had to be where they're at? So these are the kind of questions that I ask in this podcast. I hope you enjoyed today's episode. Today's episode, I am interviewing June. June and I met first on Zoom. If you've been following me, you know that I am a SmartFLOW certified yoga teacher. SmartFLOW is a teaching and practicing method of yoga created by Annie Carpenter. She is one of my main teachers, and I have a huge respect for her teaching experience, and the method she created called SmartFLOW. So June and I met on Zoom because we are both students of Annie, and we have both been studying very diligently under Annie Carpenter. At the beginning of this year in 2024, I assisted Annie's 200-hour teacher training program that happened in Oakland, California. But the last 1 week of the training happened in Tulum in Mexico. June has been assisting and observing this teacher training from Australia. So she was always there during the live and Zoom sessions. And when all of us were coming to Tulum, Mexico for 1 week to do like 1 week intensive of teacher training to kind of complete the teacher training, June actually flew from Australia to be with us in person for the last 1 week of the teacher training. Soon as I met June, we became really good friends. We got along so well. She is also a full-time yoga teacher and she loves yoga. She loves SmartFLOW method just like I do. She also loves to travel. She has a very international background, where she lived, where she's from, where she have worked, and she brings in such an amazing perspective of teaching yoga in different countries, moving to different countries, starting all over again in every places she have moved. She has 12 years of teaching full-time yoga experience, and I just really love June and enjoy her energy so much. Me and her got along so well when we met, and I almost wish we lived closer so I can hang out with her and be around her more often. But we do have a dream of doing a 200-hour teacher training together, SmartFLOW 200-hour teacher training. And we also have dream of running a retreat together. So maybe something combined of 200-hour teacher training in a destination. That would be amazing if we could lead a training like that together. So June is a former journalist. June loves creating sequences that tell a story. She completed her first yoga training in India in 2011. June had her awakening moment in 2014 through the practice of SmartFLOW, created by her teacher, Annie Carpenter. She continues to study with her to this date. The wonders of the human body led June to study and become certified in Pilates, Barre, Lagree Fitness, and Thai yoga massage. She is also certified as a role model method practitioner. In 2020, after losing her beloved uncle, sound healing called to her. She completed a diploma in sound healing and started working with people from all walks of life to share the magic of sound with them. So here is a conversation I had with June. I hope you can really hear the love and huge respect we have for the SmartFLOW method created by Carpenter. And I really love having a yoga teacher friend and a buddy that I can really nerd out about yoga, business of yoga, and also nerding out about a SmartFLOW method of teaching yoga. I hope you enjoy this episode, and I will speak to you on the other side. Welcome, June, for coming to join me on the Full-Time Yoga Teacher podcast. I'm so happy that I get to have this conversation with you today. How are you doing?
I'm good. Good to be talking to you again.
The last time I saw you was beginning of April, so almost like a month ago, was it? No, less than a month.
Oh my God, time flies.
Yeah, so we were in Tulum, which was a beautiful, beautiful place that we got to assist a retreat together, and that's how I met June. So tell the listener, where do you live?
I lived in Brisbane, Australia, the last probably 5 years now.
And before you moved to Australia, where were you?
And then I had another 4 years in Sydney, 2 years in Singapore, and I'm originally from Hong Kong.
And how long did you live in Hong Kong?
I think I was there for around 19 years, the first 19 years of my life. And then I moved to UK for around 3 years. And then I went back home again for another 5 years. Then I moved to Singapore as a full-time yoga teacher.
So you lived quite an international life, and you grew up quite international and moving and living in different countries. Did you grow up speaking English, or did you learn English?
I was studying in international school in Hong Kong. So we were learning English and Mandarin because we're following the Singapore system. I was in Singapore International School. Singapore, the language, the mother tongue, it's English and Mandarin. But my mother tongue is Cantonese.
Is that what you're most comfortable speaking even today?
Oh, yeah, definitely. I can speak Cantonese and switch English and switch back to Cantonese without problem.
Is Cantonese easier for you to speak than English, or is English easier now?
It's the same. Also the same. Yeah.
That's amazing. I learned English later. When I was 13 is when I started learning English, and I didn't speak English at all until then. But now I think my English is, for me, easier than Japanese.
Oh, really? I find it speaking Mandarin is a lot harder, even though I learn it quite young because I don't get to use it very often. But I tend to understand Mandarin better than I could speak it. But for Cantonese, definitely it's like fluent. English is fluent as well.
And how old were you when you first took your yoga class?
I actually requested to join a kids yoga class when I was young. It was a summer holiday, and I told my mom I would like to try the yoga. So it's a summer program for 2 months. And I normally sign up for different things every year. I had badminton, I had gymnastics, and then there was one particular year I signed up for a yoga summer holiday class. I forgot how old I was. I must be under 10 years old.
Oh, wow. That's yeah.
But then that was just one off. Didn't get back to any sort of yoga until I was in the UK in the winter, And the uni offers yoga classes. It was like £3 per class. Did a drop-in class every now and then, but I think less than 10 times in those 3 years.
Yeah. So you were living in the UK for university.
Yes, I was there for uni.
What were you studying?
Journalism.
Oh, really? Wow. Wanted to be a journalist.
Yes, I was. I was a journalist for maybe 3 years.
So after you graduated, you
yes.
in the UK?
No, I went back to Hong Kong. That's when I went back to Hong Kong. I was studying print journalism. So I went back home and got a job writing for French newspaper, children's newspaper. And they have the owner was French. I'm not sure whether the newspaper still exists. And so we the mother company is in France, and then the sister company is in Hong Kong. And then the newspaper was in English, targeting kids in Hong Kong. So
you were writing in English?
Yes.
Oh, wow. I didn't know that. So you started practicing a little more yoga at university in the UK. And then did you continue practicing when you moved back to Hong Kong?
I think I did like less than 10 classes when I was in the UK. But then I picked up yoga when I was working in that children's newspaper.
Okay.
Because they opened up a yoga studio opposite the office. And then I signed up for it. So I went for lunch classes. And then I got addicted. And then I went after work classes as well. I think I was doing that for a year or so. That's when I went back to actually practicing yoga.
What made you get addicted to it? Like what did you love about it?
I'm always a very sport person. So I think I really enjoy being challenged. I remember I couldn't hold a plank pose. I didn't have any strength in my body. I didn't have a lot of flexibility as well. Then I just got addicted, and then I went 1 class a day and then 2 classes a day. And then I felt like I have outgrown the studio. So I changed to another studio.
And was it what kind of yoga class was it? What style?
It was just a normal hatha, vinyasa, something like that, or yin classes. It's not a hot studio. But when I changed to another bigger studio, my mom was practicing there. So there were times that I will join her in the morning classes, and there were hot classes in that particular studio.
And when did you realize that you wanted to become a teacher?
Not immediately, because I was still working as a journalist. And then I was traveling in Europe. And then I was in Lisbon. And then I saw there was this yogi on the plaza. He was performing on the plaza. And he was sitting on hundreds of needles in lotus position.
What?
And then I was watching him. I was like, why on earth he will do something like that? And people just throw €1 into the jar that was on the floor. And there were news articles of him next to him that he was performing. And then I was interested in the whole story, why a young man sitting in the middle of the busy plaza in Lisbon, doing nothing, sitting there for 20 minutes in meditation, and then he got like €60 out of that. And I was like, why? So I was just a curious journalist, I will say. And so I just waited out for him, and then I went to interview him. And I told him that I was a journalist. I would just want to write a story about him. Something like that. But it was more like for myself, because my job was actually writing a children's newspaper. It wasn't those kind of lifestyle articles, features writer that I dreamt myself being. And my first job was not actually in that area that I was interested in. I only got hired to write children's newspapers, completely different than what I thought I wanted to be. And so while I was watching him sitting in a plaza, I was just really curious. And then he told me that he was doing this because he loved it. He loved his job. Then I realized that I didn't love my job. I didn't love to be a children's newspaper writer. I loved to be a feature writer, writing lifestyle articles. And then so it was a little bit of awakening moment of, am I doing what I loved in life? And then so I went back to Hong Kong. I was dating a guy, and then I told him that I want to start my own magazine. And then I realized there was a lot of restaurants in Hong Kong, opening, closing, and I'm really into food myself. And then so I thought, no, I'm going to publish an English food magazine for free. And my idea will be getting money from advertisement or subscription to the magazine. And so I proposed this idea, and then my partner then was like, yeah, let's do it. It was the dumbest mistake I've learned in my life, that I would never do a business with anyone anymore, especially someone, your partner or anything. And I published that magazine. I think I ran out of money. We ran out of money after maybe 4 or 5 months. And I went to approach a media company. It was a British couple, and they own a couple of media magazines and stuff like that. So I went there to the office and told them my magazine, Foodie, that's the idea. That's how I would like to earn money. But at the moment, I ran out of money. Could they be my partner? And they said yes. So they took away 60% share of the company without actually paying any money, because it wasn't earning money in the first place. Papers and the documents, they own 60% of the share, and me and then the boyfriend owned 40% of the share. And they hired me to work in their office, and I was working with their editor with more experience than me. And they start to change the whole magazine. They start to rebrand the magazine. And I felt the magazine was no longer mine. And I stopped yoga at that time when I was too busy with the whole magazine thing. I quit yoga for probably two years or so, because I was going to the studio all the time, and then I stopped doing my practice. And then I was just focusing for, I think, 1.5 years, 2 years with Foodie, the magazine. And then it turns out that me and the guy broke up. And then I realized that magazine was no longer mine. And then so I decided to just leave everything. I just left everything. And then I went to India. I went to India for a soul-searching journey. I was still like 25. So I was like, okay, this is what people do. They go to India and kind of soul-searching, find out what they want to do in life. And that was what I did when I was 25. I went to India. I stayed in a Shivananda ashram. I was crying for the first 6 days of the 2 weeks of yoga vacation. But that's when I figure out I'm going to be a yoga teacher.
Well, and how long were you in India during that time?
That first trip was 2 weeks. Because I've never been to India. I was there just by myself. I signed up for that Shivananda 2 weeks of yoga holiday or yoga vacation. So I just got a ticket for that 2 weeks. And I did not know that I will have an awakening journey, that I will be a yoga teacher. I just knew that I'm not going to go back and be a journalist. I was completely lost. I had no idea what I would like to do if I'm no longer writing for Foodie. And I kind of felt like I'm not a good writer. I was also told by the guy, the British couple, the guy, he told me that I wasn't a good writer. I was 24. I was like shocked. I was upset, but he told me I wasn't a good writer, but I'm a really good PR. He said that I should look into becoming a PR or something. And when I was 24, I was definitely processing. But now, speaking at 38, I'm actually really grateful what he told me. It took me many, many years to understood what he saw in me that I did not see in myself. And when I was in that 2 weeks vacation in the ashram, I was crying the first 6 days to figure out my life. And then I was asking myself questions I'm good at. What makes me happy? From that guy sitting in the plaza in Lisbon saying that he loved his job and all that stuff. And then I realized yoga makes me happy. And I love telling a story. I am a storyteller. I might not be good at writing it, but I'm good at telling it. And I can tell stories from other people's lives and then telling it to a class. I can tell a story from the sequences that I'll be creating when I teach. And then so after all that 2 weeks of vacation, I came back home and I realized I need to go back to India to become a yoga teacher. And that's when I went back to India 9 months after the first trip. And I did my first 200 hours.
And where was your first 200 and how did you choose that school?
I did a hatha 200 hours training. I did it in Goa, a party land. I had no idea how I came up with that option. It was fun. It was a great live experience. I get to meet great friends and people. I think there were around 13 or 15 of us from all around the world, mostly in Europe, mostly. I remember I stopped keeping in touch with some of them, but I met someone from Belgium, I met someone from Germany, I met people in Denmark, Switzerland, so mostly are Europeans. And I don't know why I chose that teacher, to be honest. He's still on my Facebook. Sometimes he still invites me to his trainings and retreats. I haven't seen him since my training.
Yeah. How long was your training? 200 hour?
I think it was three weeks living together in Goa. 3-4 weeks.
Did you have a day off or was it every day?
I think we had one day off. Oh, it's so long ago. I don't remember. It was 2010. I don't fully remember, but I'm pretty sure we must have one day off because I remember one day I was spending time in the kitchen while other people went somewhere else because I was a foodie. I love to spend time in the kitchen, so I was helping the chef preparing dinner for the group. I spent my day was in the kitchen learning Indian cuisine. It was a fun day, actually.
Yeah. And okay, so you did the 3-week-long teacher training. That was 2010, so 14 years ago. And then did you go back and start teaching right away?
I think I got my first teaching job 9 months after the training. It wasn't easy to get a teaching job back in Hong Kong because there are a lot of experienced teachers in Hong Kong. And then I remember my first teaching was in a yoga studio owned by Indians.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I was teaching a couple of classes a week. Mm-hmm. And then I think I got a little bit more classes. I think I started with 2 and then a little bit more. Yeah. Mm-hmm. It's a memory. It's not, I don't have a really good memory of that time because I was only teaching for 6 months. And then I got myself a full-time expat contract to move to Singapore.
So while you were in Hong Kong, starting out teaching, what other job did you have? Like, what did you have another job that supported your livelihood?
I did. I was, of course, living with my parents, so my rents are free. And I was teaching English for kids. I'm not a kid person, But I don't know why all my paid jobs were all involved with kids. So I got myself out of writing for kids magazine. But then in order to earn living, apart from teaching yoga with just 2 or 6 classes, I had to have a second job, which was teaching kids English. Mm-hmm. Teaching them, I think, on weekends and some weekdays. And I think they were 5 years old till maybe 8 years old. I also was helping them to prepare for a drama competition. So all of that, yeah, something like that. I was teaching and doing drama. I didn't remember how I ended up with all those jobs.
So you got a year contract teaching job, and
it was just mostly like casual. I think the English teaching was casual.
Yeah.
So I was casual job as a yoga teacher, and then I was casual working as an English and a yoga teacher in order to earn money to just live. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
And in your mind, were you like, you wanted to become a full-time teacher at the point? Like you were trying to focus on?
Yes, I was. I think I was 26 when I started my first teaching. And I was trying so hard to find a full-time teaching job.
Yeah.
I don't think it was easy because I was inexperienced. And so I was applying a lot of overseas teaching jobs. And that's how I got myself a studio in Singapore. The owner hired me. She was the one handling all the paperwork and documents. And I'm always very grateful to her. She took me to Singapore and I got to become a full-time teacher for the first time of my life. Mm-hmm. My contract was 1 year and then I extended it for another year. Mm-hmm. And I think if I didn't move to Australia, I will still be teaching in Singapore. It was my first time working for one studio. It was fun. I was just a young teacher back then, so everything was fun. And I was promised with around 12 or 15 classes a week. So I could make enough money to live in Singapore. And on top of that, we had housing allowance as well. So there were promised that we will be able to earn a certain amount of money. And if we got extra classes, that's great. If we have private bookings from the studio, then we get to earn more money as well. And it was a hot yoga studio. And Singapore is hot. Every day is like over 30 degrees. So working in a hot yoga studio means I am in the heat at 47 degrees. I don't know what is the convert to another.
I don't know.
So I was teaching at 47 degrees almost every day.
Wow.
The moment I walked into a room, in 5 seconds, I'll be like sweating and dripping in sweat.
Yeah. And did they pay for your flight to get there as well?
I think they did, actually.
And you found this job online?
Yes, it was. I was lucky. We had a few, the studio hired a couple of expat teachers. So there were someone from Italy. Actually, there was only one person from Italy. And there was one from Austria. And there was one from me from Hong Kong. There was one from Australia. But I think that Australian teacher was there was an American as well, but I think they were there with their husband. So they were already living in Singapore.
Yeah. And so your average number of classes were like 12 to 15 classes a week?
Yeah, around 12 to 16, I would say. And then when I was there, I figured out a way to travel and to teach, because Singapore was such a great place to travel around. So I remember I decided not to have any day offs. So I will work 6 or 8 weeks in a row. I could be teaching 16 to 25 classes a week. And then I will have a week or 10 days off. And I will be traveling. I'll be in Cambodia, in Vietnam, in Thailand. I got to travel quite a lot of countries when I was living in Singapore that 2 years.
That sounds fun. And did you enjoy your full-time yoga life there?
It was fun. I had a really, really good time. I think if I didn't meet my partner, I might still be in Singapore.
Yeah.
Because I was studying in Singapore International School. So I had a lot of childhood friends from Singapore. So some of my really good friends are still there. So I'm never lonely. I'm always out there in the world, meeting up with friends. The students become friends as well.
Yeah.
So I've definitely had a really good 2 years of my life in Singapore.
So you were there for 2 years working as a full-time yoga teacher. Did you have other, did you have private or did you do workshop? Was there other classes that you taught outside of just the group classes?
I mostly ran workshops within the studio. So we got paid a class rate. We will have a workshop rate and we have a private class rate as well. So I was teaching private groups for the studio. I was teaching normal classes. I was teaching workshops as well. And I also taught privately that they pay me cash. Because in Singapore, I'm not sure whether it's still now, but back in the days, there were a lot of expats and a lot of expats' wives. And they were the one who hired me. And I will be teaching in their house.
Amazing. So you eventually met someone and that led you to move again. So tell me what happened.
Yeah, I was learning Thai yoga massage in Chiang Mai. So my first training, that's where I met Piotr. And he was in the same massage school with me. He was my first massage partner. And that's how I met my current partner. And it was a little bit messy. I don't think I'm going to go into the story here. But then we ended up being together. He moved to Singapore. And he was waiting for his Australian permanent residency. He used his work to apply for a visa. And when I met him, he didn't tell me. I didn't know. I had no clue about it. And we were in Singapore for 10 months. And he told me, it's really humid. He needs to get a job. And he told me that he got his Australian visa. And then I could also move to Australia. I was under 30, so I could move to Australia using the work student, what is that? A working holiday. Yes, working holiday visa. So then I was like, okay, yeah, why not? I was young. I was like 28, I think. I don't know. Yeah, 28, because I was in Singapore 26. I was like, yeah, why not? Let's go. Let's move to Australia. I haven't thought about all that networks and followers I have built in Singapore. And so I just left after 2 years of my contract. And then we moved to Sydney. And that's where I started all over again.
Yeah, starting all over can be quite it's a challenging thing as a yoga teacher because you have to build up your following again, and no studio owners know you or know your style of teaching or your experience level. So how was it to move to a new country, new city, and trying to pursue a full-time yoga teacher career?
Definitely. I haven't thought about it. I was like 28. I was like, yeah, why not? Adventure. Let's go. And then I started off. I was really lucky because the studio in Singapore used to have a studio in Sydney. So I told the owner, I'm moving to Sydney. And then she gave me 2 classes in Sydney. And she told me in Australia, it's different. It's not a full-time teacher. I have to be self-employed. And so the best she could do then was to offer me 2 classes on a Saturday. And of course I took it. with whatever income that works, it's a great way to start. So I started with 2 classes a week on a Saturday. And I remembered my classes in Singapore was busy. 20 people on a wait list. And when I was in Sydney, I was surprised how small the classes were. And it was a weird time on the weekend. It was like 2-3 p.m. So the classes were quiet. And I wasn't having as much fun as I was in Singapore. And then I was also looking for more classes, more teaching as well. And I ended up teaching mostly at Virgin Active. They gave me, before I left to Brisbane, I had 10 classes with them. And then I had other classes elsewhere as well. But then my major income was from Virgin Active. And towards the end, I was there with them I was the opening team of that particular club. And towards the last year, they told me they were looking for head of yoga. And it was a kind of a part-time contract, because I think the higher teacher works maybe 20 hours. So it's still kind of a part-time contract, casual. And I told them, no, I'm not ready. I don't think I'm good enough to be a head of yoga. I'm not going to apply and compete with other more experienced teachers. And then I left, and then I moved to Brisbane. And again, I chose to left again. I was like constantly leaving. So after 4 years in Sydney, I just left, and then I moved to Brisbane. And then I started all over again.
What made you move out of Sydney?
I didn't quite like the climate. I didn't quite like the people around there. I find Queensland people are more friendly. And definitely Queensland it's just warmer climate. And I really, really like the sunshine and stuff. So we decided to pack our bags and then move to Brisbane. And now it's 5 years here. Mm-hmm. I still pretty like this place.
And how many classes were you teaching in Sydney? What was like the most number of classes?
Oh my God, I'm always in my 26. Like the maximum, it's, I think, always 26. Haven't hit 27 yet.
Yeah.
But 26 is my max. And I'm actually really exhausted if I have to teach 26 classes.
Yeah.
And sometimes I will teach 26 classes in Brisbane from time to time. But when I had to compare my energy level when I was 26 in Singapore to now, it's 2 different levels.
Yeah. So how was it like moving to Brisbane? Like what was that starting over journey like?
I had no studio like in Sydney that backed me up. So I had to start from scratch. I had to I send emails to a lot of studios here, and a very different part of the Brisbane scene and Sydney scene was there are mostly boutique studios in Brisbane, not so much of big studios, big gyms. There's no Virgin Active. I told them, can you open Virgin Active in Brisbane so I can have a job right away? And then I can be the head of yoga if you hired me. And they said, no, the Brisbane market is too small. So they have Virgin Active in Melbourne and in Sydney because they are the biggest states in Australia. But they don't have in Brisbane. And I did approach the manager of Virgin Active, and the manager hooked me up with someone from Brisbane, and I started actually with 1 class a week. It's another big gym. It's a Good Life. It's called Good Life. It's one of the big gyms here, and I didn't realize that Brisbane is a little bit inconvenient with traveling, not as convenient as in Sydney. So the 1 class a week was very far. I had to take a train and a train ride. So So that 1 hour class sometimes end up 3 hours. So it's just really far out. And by the time you wait for the train and get off and wait for the right train to go home, it feels like 1 hour of pay job. It took me 3 hours of my time. So when I got a bit more stable after a year, I actually quit that place.
So now you've been in Brisbane for how many years?
5 years now.
Years. And how many classes do you teach a week, and how many different locations do you teach at?
At the moment, I will say the minimum is 17, 18 is my minimum. And on days that I say yes to everything to cover, or on odd days that when I have a corporate or private or whatever, I could add up to 25, 26. And I teach at around 4 studios. Mm-hmm. So running around 4 places. And I used to teach mostly at 1 studio with around 8 classes. And this year I made a huge change. Mm-hmm. And then I kind of divide equal amount of classes among all those 4 studios.
What made you make that decision?
Money. That's the truth. Being a full-time teacher, we don't earn a lot. So when I got an offer this year with a better pay, with a new studio, I took up the offer. Mm-hmm. And then I drop off half of my schedule in another studio. And that's why I kind of shift things around. Yeah. And it's actually a really good move that I did. Because after some time being a yoga teacher, it's not easy to ask for pay rise. Not at all. It's mostly a standard rate wherever, especially in Sydney, it's mostly a standard rate. Mm-hmm. It's quite frustrating that they don't have different rates for, new teacher, you get this rate. Experienced teacher, you get this rate. And most of the studio in Australia, it's one flat rate. Really? Whether you're brand new or whether you are experienced.
Really? Wow.
It is.
That's frustrating.
And it is. But that new studio that hired me, they actually have different rates for different experience. Mm. So with my experience, I got the highest rate. And then after moving to Brisbane for 5 years, I realized, I didn't know they have this. I didn't know that they have different rates for different experience. So when I drop off half of my schedule at one of my regular studio, which is like 5 minutes walk away from my house, that studio owner panicked and she decided to match my rates. So I actually got a jump in my pay rate after trying to get her to increase my pay for the last 5 years.
So now that's great though. That's great that, they both raised your rate for you.
Yeah. That's a good news.
Yeah. So you do more than yoga. I heard you say you studied sound healing, and also you do cacao ceremonies. So can you share with the listeners other modalities that you offer and how you kind of weave yoga into that?
So I started off with yoga. Yoga is definitely my first love. And then 2 years after yoga, I actually started Pilates. And the reason I started with mat Pilates was because I had back pain from practicing yoga. And I was a very junior teacher back then. I was pushing myself 110%. And I was practicing without alignment. And I had really serious back injuries. Well, while I was teaching in Singapore, I injured my back quite seriously that I had to take painkillers to teach. I was going to different therapists to try to fix my back. I went to chiro, I went to roving, massage to fix my back. And I heard of, if you have weak back, then go and practice Pilates. Strengthen your core. So that's what I did. I practiced Pilates, and then I did a training. So I became a Pilates teacher as well. And then I started teaching Pilates when I moved to Sydney. And after Pilates, I also did a Barre and reformer training. So I could teach Barre and Reformer. So in my whole week of my teaching, I will be teaching yoga classes, mat classes, and then I will have like 1 Barre and 1 Reformer classes. That's my whole week of my teaching. And that's how I could actually earn a bit more money, because in Brisbane is a really small place. I think if I just focus on teaching yoga, I would not have a lot of job opportunities out there. And I just love learning new things. So I was also inspired to learn sound healing. So I also did a diploma in sound healing. And I run monthly kind of sound baths, and I'll hire a studio space and I will charge tickets per person. And that's how I could earn a little bit more than just a normal class. Because just a normal class, you don't earn a lot of money, to be honest. It's only when you run workshops and events and retreats, or you have private clients or corporate clients, that's how you will be able to make an actual living as a full-time teacher.
I agree. I think it's so hard to just teach group yoga classes and make enough to live. Otherwise, we're just working ourselves to death. We have to teach so many classes to be able to make enough to live. So I definitely agree with you with importance of diversifying the income stream from different styles of classes or different modalities and workshops and, all of these things. I think it definitely is a great tip for listeners who's listening. And I know you have eventually met and learned about Annie Carpenter and started studying with her more deeply in SmartFLOW method. So how did you first meet her?
I met her in Sydney. I moved to Sydney and there was a yoga studio just up the road. I love it when there's a studio next to me. And I remember it wasn't the first studio I jumped into when I first moved to Sydney. It was always some obstacles going to that studio. I remember there was one time when I was, I'm ready to try out Prashana. That's the name of the studio. It was raining heavily. So I was like, oh no, I'm not going. So I think I didn't really get into try that studio until maybe 2-3 months after I moved there. But I have been to other studios, but just not Prashana. But then eventually fate brought me to Prashana and I had my first class. And it's such a humbling experience that I realized that every asana I did was not correctly aligned. And my downward dog was wrong. My eagle pose was not right. I was like, wow. And then I left the studio walking down the stairs, telling myself, this is my studio. And since then, I've been practicing. I was practicing in Prashana once I found that studio. And Prashana was actually owned by Ananda, who was a SmartFLOW trainer. And when she found out, when I took my first class with Ananda, it was so difficult. And when she found out that I was a yoga teacher, she hired me. So then I get to practice for free and I get to earn money teaching at her studio. And then she told me her teacher, Annie, was visiting. She was going to lead a 200 hours training in Sydney. So I signed up for it and I did my first 200 hours with Annie in 2015. And there's no return from SmartFLOW. And I fell in love with the method. And that's how I met Reka through SmartFLOW.
So amazing that definitely I agree with that. SmartFLOW is such an intelligent method of practicing and teaching. And I have a hard time sometimes trying to explain to people how profound SmartFLOW method is. It'll take me a long time to actually explain it, whereas it's hard to do it in an elevator pitch. It's hard to just summarize it right away. I think maybe people need to feel it and experience it to really realize the profound intelligence of SmartFLOW. But I think it's so amazing that I get to meet you or people from all over across the world who also have such a strong passion and passion for spreading and practicing in this way, in a SmartFLOW way. So I think it's really cool that I get to meet somebody like you. And, I feel like we're friends right away and we have a similar respect for yoga. And I think it's so amazing. So that was your second 200 hour, was with Annie Carpenter. So
the one that I met you was the second, 200 hours.
Your SmartFLOW 200 hours in Sydney was your second 200 because you already did one.
Yeah, definitely. And if I have to give an advice for someone looking into doing a teacher's training, I would definitely say go for someone that you have practice with. Because the first 200 hour I did was a live experience, but it's not one that I could be a teacher. I'm ready to be a good teacher, not at all. But when I was young, I just whatever, go for it. Did the 200 hour and immediately go and teach. Because you had the guts to do it when you were young.
Yeah, very, very good advice of choosing the right teacher, right school that really you resonate with and you feel like you can learn so much from. So I definitely agree with you on that. And now that you've been teaching for quite some time, 14 years full time, did you ever feel
12 years? 12 years, I think. Yeah.
Did you ever feel like you wanted to quit, or did you ever feel like maybe this is not my path, or did you always felt this is it?
In Brisbane, when I first moved to Brisbane, I definitely felt like I want to quit. And the major reason for wanting to quit was just it's not making enough money. That's the truth. That's not able to make enough money as a full-time teacher. It's the pay per class was a little bit lower compared to Sydney. So when I was in Sydney, I just teach. I did not need to. It didn't even cross my mind to run events or workshops or retreats because the money itself was enough for me to live in Sydney. But when I was in Brisbane, the amount that you got was just so little. You just think, oh my God, how I can maintain a life, just a normal life after paying rent and food. How can you even have money to live? And that's when I was thinking, what could I do? I'm not going to write, that's for sure. And what else could I do? And I was like, I had no idea. I've been teaching yoga for so long. I had no idea what I could do apart from teaching. So I just told myself, I'm going to keep going. And I only started running workshops and events in Brisbane, meeting students and normal classes, building the numbers, the followers. And then when you decided to run an event, and then you will announce it in the class, or you will tell them your website, or you will just find ways to promote. Sometimes I print flyers as well. So I leave the flyers there. Hey, I'm doing this. Take the flyer if you're interested in attending some of my events. And then I just start doing kind of events. I started with maybe just a handful of events. And then now I kind of do like monthly something. I have something on every month so that I could get to earn a little bit more money.
And are there not many full-time yoga teachers in Lisbon?
Not a lot, I have to say. Most of the people have a full-time job. So they will teach the early mornings or after work classes, and then they have a normal job.
I see.
But then in a way that for me, I always feel it's very different when you're full-time devoted to one thing, to be a teacher, compared to teaching as a part-time.
Yeah.
Because in a way, you have no time to practice. You wake up, you teach, you finish work, you teach, and then 8 hours, you're in a normal job. And for me, no, I wake up, I practice. I live and breathe what I'm doing in my life. So it's a very, very different kind of lifestyle. Yes, I might not make as much money as them, but in a way, it's very fulfilling. And I know this is what I want to do in this lifetime, that it's my dharma in this lifetime, is sharing and spreading the knowledge of yoga and SmartFLOW to the world. rather than have another full-time job for surviving in a way, that I could still make teaching to survive.
And what was it like during the pandemic for you?
It was interesting. I immediately convert to teaching online. Lucky my partner, Piotr, is pretty good with technology, so he helped me out with everything. I was living in a 1-bedroom apartment, so we converted the kitchen into a studio. So I had a mailing list, so I kind of sent out the mailing list to my students. I'm doing Zoom classes, and I'm just charging like $10, I remember, 10 Aussie dollar. So I was just charging them that money, and they can just do the PayPal, and then I will send them a link. And I was doing that for a little bit, and then we in Brisbane is pretty good. We didn't have a really long lockdown, so it's around 3 months. So I was doing that for around 3 months, and then I went back to in-person classes. And the government was really great. They were being a self-employed. They said that if your earnings are affected by 30%, then you can apply for the help from the government. Mm-hmm. So for a lot of full-time teachers, they get help from the government. Yeah. Definitely. And because of this pandemic, it made me realize that I also cannot rely on teaching corporate classes. Mm-hmm. Because during the pandemic, a lot of companies pull out from in-person classes, and a lot of them are still in a really tight budget. Because there was a moment of my life I was thinking, I'm just going to focus on corporate classes because they pay well. And then in March, I was getting all the phone calls everywhere telling me, no, we have to cancel, we have to stop, we have to lock down, we have to close down. And then I lost a lot of income stream from corporate classes. And then so after pandemic, I realized I cannot rely on just corporate classes to survive.
Yeah. And when you're teaching your own online classes from your kitchen, were you making more than you would have at the studio? Because since students...
I was making more per class, but then I only have 1 classes online compared to if I run around 3 locations or teaching 3 classes, I might still earn a bit more. So it kind of depends. Great that you wake up and then you teach, but then it soon kind of dies out, because when the studios all open up, the students went back to classes. Yeah. They are not into Zoom. But I have friends who stay online. They probably just went back to less than 5 studio classes and they focus on online. But I think with my skill from SmartFLOW, hands-on adjustment and looking at bodies, it is an in-person experience.
Yeah, I can understand that. It's a whole different way of teaching online. And I feel like it's hard to replicate what I can do in person when I'm teaching to online teaching. It's really hard to be able to see students' body as well online, or be able to give this individualized cue is definitely a lot harder online. So you said that you would promote your monthly workshop or events with flyers and, giving your students your website. Are you able to do that at the yoga studio? In the USA, we're not allowed to promote for our own workshop at a studio. Is that something you come across in Australia as well?
I just do it because I'm self-employed. They didn't hire me. I'm not. I think one of the studio, they recently converted me as an employee. But I hire the studio space to run a lot of my events. So in a way that I also pay them for advertisement. So I'm allowed to announce my events because my events are in the studio as well. Mm-hmm. And for other studios, I'm not employed by them. So I'm just self-employed. So I'm still able to announce it. And the owners are not around, so I don't care.
No, that makes sense. I think I don't know, in different parts of the United States, but definitely in LA, a lot of studios are now employing the teachers. We're not an independent contractor.
Is it because you get some benefits out of it?
I don't know why, because I used to get hired as an independent contractor, and nowadays it has been like I'm an employee by them now. So I wonder.
Is it because they pay superannuation?
Maybe, I don't know why. They may be like some kind of law that came out that if you employ more than this many employees, you have to employ them, not do independent contractor. I'm not sure. But yeah, it's interesting. If necessary, are you able to fully support yourself financially through full-time yoga teaching career?
Yes. I was earning way more in Singapore. Shocking. Shockingly.
Wow.
And I was earning a lot in Singapore because of the private expats.
Mm-hmm.
And they pay cash. That's a really good one.
Mm-hmm.
And even now, if I could still support myself as a full-time teacher, and definitely changes after 5 years in Brisbane. Not in the beginning. In the beginning, I was just earning penny. Mm-hmm. Probably I was enough to pay the rent and food, and that's it. But if you want to compare still a yoga teaching job and a corporate job, uncomparable. It's in Australia, it's uncomparable. If you are teaching yoga full-time as a self-employed, I can't speak for those who are hired by a yoga studio. I don't know how much they earn, or hired by a gym. I'm not sure how that works. But for sure that as a self-employed in Australia compared to a corporate job, you might still not earn as much as them, but the lifestyle, it's different. It depends what you really want in life. Mm-hmm. And I know for this lifetime what I want, and I know this is what I'm going to be doing.
And looking back at your teaching journey, because you have taught at different countries, you have moved multiple times to kind of start over in new town and new cities. What are some advice you wish someone have shared with you earlier in your yoga teaching career, or maybe advice you want to give to a newer teacher?
I do say never give up teaching group classes, even though it's not a lot of money. Because that's where you get to meet people. You get to meet maybe a private client. Maybe you get to meet someone of the owner of a company that they want to hire you to teach corporate class. And you get to meet a diversity of students. And when you run different events, you never know who you attract. So even though, yes, teaching group classes, you don't get paid a lot, but it's definitely a really good source to find students, and you don't know what kind of opportunities that will lead you in the future.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I love that. I think that's such a great advice because, yeah, you're right. Teaching group classes may not be the only way. If you are a full-time teacher, I think it's important to diversify your income stream, but it's a great place to build connections and network, and you never know when certain conversation you had with a student or a random person or a certain connection you made can lead you to another opportunity or lead you to another connection. So yeah, definitely. And with your corporate jobs and privates that you have, how were you able to find them? Was it through word of mouth? Was it recommendations, connection?
It was literally from the students in a normal group class. That they were like, oh, I want to improve my practice. And then they will say, hey, June, do you teach privately? I say, yeah. And that's how I get the clients. And through group class.
Mm-hmm. I love that. And what aspects of full-time yoga teaching do you love the most? And what aspect do you find it most challenging?
I think I really there's a big difference between when I was teaching in Singapore just for one studio, and now when I run around different places. And I think I don't prefer to go back to teaching for just one studio. And it's just being very demanding in a way. You see the same students. And I remember in Singapore, we can see how many students that we teach in 3 months. I was teaching 3,000 people in 3 months. So I have 1,000 students a month, and 1,000 of the students might be the same student. They just go for different, maybe 3 times or 4 times a week. And I find it really challenging in a way is to be able to keep creating sequences. If I have to teach a full class 4 times a week, and it's the same students coming, I was like, oh my God, what should I teach? And I don't like to repeat my sequence. It's just me being with a journalist's background. I loved new stuff all the time. I don't like a fixed sequence. I don't like things that are predictable. And now it's great. I can have one sequence, and then I teach that one sequence in different studios, and then I have another new sequence next week. So it makes my job a lot easier, I would say. And this is the interesting part of it, that I get to meet different people. Because if you work for one studio, you're seeing the same people all the time. They have new members, yes, but it's still the same. Most of them are the same people all the time. I hope I answer your question.
Yeah, you did. And since you've been teaching full time for 12 years and you've been I feel like when I look at you, I feel like you're very strong, independent, full-time teacher. You've been doing this for a while, and you're not afraid to go get it and do it. And, sometimes you have to work 26 classes a week. You're going to do it to get it done if you have to get it done. And I feel like it's such a strength that you hold that I really respect, and I get very inspired by you. And since you've been teaching for 12 years, does it ever get boring or old, or what keeps you inspired since you've been doing this for so long?
Yeah, sometimes I feel bored. But the diversity, that's why I need to teach yoga, and then Pilates, and then Barre, and then reformer. Sometimes I have 3 classes in a row, but it has to be something different. I might be teaching the first class is a yoga class, the second is a Pilates, and then the third is a Barre. Especially being a Germanite, we like interesting things. So I think that's one of the reasons why I like to learn different modality, and constantly changing things. And for me, sometimes I find teaching a yoga class, it's like me writing a story. So I get to bring the journalism background, weave it into my classes. Because the feedback from my students were the class is always different. And so it keeps them interesting in the practice. It's not always the same thing again and again.
I love that. And do you teach and sequence in a way that is very SmartFLOW inspired and influenced?
Yes, I do. I came back from our 200 hours. Uh-huh. And one of the students was like, oh my God, June, today you sound so much like Annie. I said, what do you mean? I said, do I always sound like Annie? No, not sounds like Annie, but the commanding and the pushing, the strong. I was like, oh, okay.
Yeah. And what does your practice look like? You said that how important it is for you to have that daily practice. So what does your practice look like these days?
I love to practice the sequence that I will teach. So my morning practice, if I don't have to teach morning class, it will be the preparation of the sequence that I will teach. And I do have to say, if you want to be a really good teacher, practice what you teach. So it's in your brain, in your body. So when you go and teach that sequence that you practiced, it makes sense and it just flows. You don't hesitate, oh, what's the next pose? Or you don't make up a pose on the spot.
How much in detail are you preparing your sequence for the week? Do you write it down, or do you kind of have the theme in your head and you kind of know what to put together?
I still write down every single sequence. Mm. I used to write it on papers. Mm. I still have a stack of papers that I told myself I'm going to type it in. And it was still sitting there, moving from house to house. And right now I just type that sequence on the internet. Mm-hmm. But the truth is I never look back at the sequence or repeat that. Uh-huh. But I just want to. But I find it, if you prepare a sequence and if you type it out, it's in your memory. And then when you go and teach, it's like in the memory there. And then you can just teach it, flow it out.
Yeah. And you said you create a new sequence about once a week these days?
Yep. Once or twice a week, a new yoga sequence.
Mm-hmm. And another question I have, this is my second to last question, but what does success mean to you as a full-time yoga teacher?
I have to say recently, because I think it changes all the time, but I was manifesting that this year I need to learn, grow, and create for this year. And I spent a lot of money recently on the SmartFLOW training recently, because it's just so expensive with the tickets, flying just to the other side of the world and the training and the retreat. So I manifest that I need to have sold-out events, because sold-out events will be able to make enough money for me to go for my trips and the training. And I think I felt success the last 3-4 months was the first 3 events that I did for January, February, and March. It was all sold out. And then I made me realize, finally, 5 years in Brisbane, I finally could make my event sold out. And I think that's how I felt for now at this moment. That's how I value, I did my work and now I'm receiving the fruit of the work.
Yeah. I love to hear that it was sold out. Sounds great. I said one more question, but I do have another one. So 2 more questions.
Yep.
What makes you so sure? Like, it seems like you have this like very strong inner knowing that teaching is your dharma. So what is it about it that you're so sure this is it? Like, this is what you're meant to be doing?
I think if I did not hit rock bottom when I was 24-5 with the magazine, without going to India for my soul searching journey, crying the first 6 days and figuring out, constantly asking myself the question, what makes me happy? What do I want to do? If the answer wasn't teaching yoga, I would not know that I'm actually so sure this is my dharma. This is what I meant to do in this life. When I found out the answer, because a lot of people have a midlife crisis. They're not sure what they want to do in their life when they hit 30s and 40s and 50s. But then I think I got that when I was 25. And that's why ever since that moment and found out the answer, I knew this is my dharma, my life. And whenever I felt like I want to give up, when I first moved to Brisbane, I was like, how can I make enough money to live as a teacher? And then I remind myself, I chose this path for a reason. And I just don't give up. I just keep doing it. And I'm looking forward what's next.
And like you said, you're seeing the fruit of your action now, like it sometimes it's not easy. You decide this is your path and like right away within a year, you become the successful teacher. You've been teaching for 12 years and you said like, wow, now I'm seeing the fruit of my action. You have sold out events and workshop and, it just takes time to build that, right? But you just have to be consistent. I love it. And my last question to you is, I think we kind of talked about this quite a bit when we're in Tulum together, but where do you see your yoga teaching going in the future? What is your goal if you have one, or what is like where do you see the path moving towards from now on?
I'll be very keen to run 200 hours training. Finally, I feel like I'm ready. And finally, I can start to see the dream slowly coming true. Because when I was 16, I knew that I would like to travel the world. I knew that I'm not going to be stay-at-home mom, 2 kids, husband. I never have that in my dream. But my dream was always to move to different countries, live in different places for a while. I think that was what I've been doing as well. 2 years here, 4 years there. And this sort of moving again gets really, more recently after the training we did in Tulum, because I could see that sooner or later we could run and lead SmartFLOW 200 hours. And I'm also looking forward to one day running with Reika, with you, in another part of the world and traveling. 3 weeks here. Yeah, 3 weeks there. Wow. And that's the part of the seeing what I'm going to do in the future of teaching yoga. Because I have been focusing on teaching students, but I do have to say I'm getting a bit afraid of how do I attract people who wants to do 200 hours? How do I attract people who might want to learn from me? Because it's a very different audience than students. And right now my events are targeting mostly on students. But how can I convert into attracting maybe teachers who would like to learn? And that's a whole different category. And I think I still need a little bit more experience in that. Maybe I need a lot more experience than that. And that's a journey. That's a path. It's never ending. So even though we are not climbing the corporate ladder, there's a yoga ladder there as well.
Yeah, totally. There's definitely that yoga ladder that we're both aiming to climb up for sure. And I would love to lead a 200 with you someday and in different countries. And also I just had an idea of like, wouldn't it be cool? You and I did half of SmartFLOW teacher training. Like you do half in Australia and with your student group, I'm doing half in wherever my home is. And then like second half of the training happens in another country. But then like we bring the two groups together and we both teach the second half together.
Oh, that's a nice idea. So that means we'll teach the whole 200 hours and then the last 1 week we merge together.
Yeah.
Oh, that's a fun idea. That's really good.
Last 1 week or it could be last 2 weeks, depends.
Oh yeah, that's good. Now we have to talk to Annie.
Well, thank you so much for your time, June. Tell the listener how they can find you, how they can get in touch with you if they have any questions, and also any, I don't know, your social media website or your upcoming events or workshop that you want to let the listener know about.
You can find me at bodyworkwithjune.com, and I didn't sign up for .au. because I know I will be traveling. So from the start, it's always .com. So I'm not bind by the location. And my Instagram is also Bodywork with June. Yeah. Right. And I'm not really good at marketing on social media, but you can find my stuff there. Lovely talking with you, Reika. I'm really glad I get to meet you.
Me too. And I'll definitely tag or link all of that on the show notes. Well, you say you're not good at promoting yourself, but if you're selling out your workshop, you're doing something right.
Hopefully.
Well, thank you so much for your time. And let's stay connected and keep encouraging and inspiring each other.
Yes. And watch out our future 200 hours listener.
Yes. The listener will be the first one to know about our combined 200-hour teacher training someday.
Yes.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. See you.
I hope you enjoyed this episode and the conversation I had with June today. As you heard, June is such a go-getter. She just keeps going. She doesn't quit. She is very strong and independent yoga teacher. And I love that about her. And I love that she has taught in different countries, different places, and moved multiple times and learned how to start over in each new cities that she moved to. I think this conversation really shows her resilience and also her love for teaching yoga and movement. As you heard at the very end, we love to talk about our dreams of leading a training and retreat together in different part of the world. Since she lives in Australia and I am based in the United States, hopefully we can make this dream come true and lead a training and retreat together in another part of the world. I hope this conversation was fun and inspiring to you. And I really, really would appreciate it if you could share this episode or this podcast with your yoga teacher friends, other full-time yoga teachers that you might know of, or even someone who is considering of becoming a yoga teacher. If you have any questions, suggestions, or topic you want me to talk about, or even a teacher that you want me to interview, please don't hesitate to message me either on Instagram or through my website. My Instagram is @ReikaYoga, and my website is www.reikayoga.com. And I really, really would appreciate it if you could leave me a review on whatever platform you're listening to this podcast from. Follow, subscribe, and share with your community. That would be super, super, super helpful for me. So thank you so much, and I will speak to you next week. Have a great day.